where Nigeria's finest conversation takes place every evening. My name is Precious Inyi, and this show is produced by Promise. And as usual, we'll have quite a platter of conversations on a hot topic this evening. But before we get on those conversations, I'll let you in on a couple of things, right? All right, a quick one just to catch up with some stories making the round. We have it in the news that Atiku Abubakar, the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, has just appealed to the tribunal judgment at the Supreme Court. And of course, that isn't unexpected. The former vice president today, Tuesday, in a 35-ground notice of appeal court stated that the tribunal, in the judgment delivered by Justice Haruna Tsammani, committed a grave error. Well, that's some of the things trending that we'll have to talk about. But you know what? Today is a special edition of the show, The Evening Rush. So, I've been thinking of having this conversation. So I thought, why not? Why can't we talk about it? If you do know, you will know that the media plays a very critical role, and you too as an individual should play a very critical role to foster good leadership in any society. What is the ideal case, really? So we'll be looking at leadership in Nigeria, by extension Africa, actually, and then we'll be looking at things that we can do as individuals and the role that media could play, have played, or should play, to foster good leadership, as it were, in Africa. And I have joining me for this conversation, David. Hundeyin, David, thank you so much for obliging me this request. I appreciate you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Great. So, yes, you're a journalist, right? So let's start with having a bit of a background as to what your work is about. I am a journalist, but I'm a radio presenter. My work is to come and report all those data that you've gone to dig out. But your own is quite extensive. It's different, right? Because you are an investigative journalist. So can you put us through a little bit, summary on what you do?
So, I consider the main purpose of my job to create some sort of positive effect on society using storytelling as my device. So basically, as against just being a reporter, which is what I think a lot of people mistake a journalist for being. A reporter is just a type of journalist.
So but I like the fact that you mentioned this. Apologies for cutting you. So every time, everybody expects every journalist to either be investigative or be a reporter, and they fail to understand that it's a profession that does actually have different arms. So I like the fact that you mentioned that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, there are multiple kinds of journalists. So absolutely. My kind of journalist, the investigative journalist, we are what some people refer to as newsmakers, because we take the less beaten path. Let me put it that way. So where a conventional a reporter's job is the 5 W's and the H, as we're taught in journalism school.
Absolutely, you still remember that?
Yeah, of course. Investigative journalist's job is also the 5 W's and H, but it's also there's a bit of philosophy attached to it, because you actually have to select what stories you want to cover first of all. For every story that I cover, there are probably 4 or 5 that I end up not covering. So every story has to be justified. I try as much as possible to make it such that every single story that I do has a public interest, has a strong public interest angle to it. So which is why when people say, "Oh, David, go and investigate justice for Mohbad," no, that's never going to happen, because that's not a public interest story. It's a tragic story, but it's a tragic story about one person and that person's family. Now, if it were something about someone who is not a celebrity, someone in Yaba, then that might be a story I'll be interested in, because that's a public interest story. That's Johnny Everyman's story. That's not a celebrity story, right? So that's sort of like the philosophical angle that is involved in picking the stories that I pick. And in doing stories, I set out to accomplish a goal. Right? I consider it to be a crime against my profession to do this watery both sides thing. So there's a quote which I heard for the first time in 2016, which has never left my mind. I forget the exact person who said it, but it's an American journalist, and it was something to the effect of, if one person says that it's raining outside and another person says that the sun is out and the weather is great, your job as a journalist is not to report both sides of that conversation and leave it to the audience, quote unquote.
To choose.
Their job is to open the window and determine what the truth is. So that's how I see my job. So I don't see my job as a place where I should be shy to take sides, or I should be shy to have an opinion, because the truth has a side, and the truth is always, in a manner of speaking, an opinion. Right? What establishes truth is facts. Right? So the fact of being opinionated or taking a side doesn't negate the truth in something, which I think is another major misconception that many people have about journalism, including many journalists too. So that's why I see my job as. I see my job as there's a very succinct way that I once saw it encapsulated. It was just one sentence. It said a journalist's job is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. So that's what I try to do.
Interestingly, I think you're in luck a bit, because at least your job allows you, permits you to have an opinion. For some of us, we are not supposed to be opinionated in any way, not even to air our view in any way. So that makes it a bit different for us too. Yes, but before we go into the focus of our conversation, which has got to do with leadership, especially in this part of the world, what are those things that you would say your job has made you do or not do that is away from your comfort?
Sorry, I think I lost the last 10 seconds or so.
Okay, so I said, what would you say that are the things that your job would have made you do or not make you do, in the process of discharging your duties? Okay, so I don't know if you can sort of speak closer to the mic, because I keep losing your words. Oh my goodness, I am as close to the mic as I can ever be. Okay, so the question is, what are those things that you would say your job has made you do, and the things that it hasn't also made you do, or the things that it has denied you of? I like some of those things.
Okay, so
the reason I'm pointing this out is for people to understand, sometimes what it takes to be on the other side.
Right.
Yeah.
So the things that has made me do, one of the craziest experiences that I've had is, I think this was in 2021, early 2021, February 2021, when I first became aware of the story of Itunu Babalola, the Nigerian girl who was wrongfully imprisoned in Cote d'Ivoire. And yes, and this was actually part of a wider investigation I was working on into human trafficking of Nigerian girls into the West African sub-region. So Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, Mali, Senegal, there's a whole trafficking network there. So teenage Nigerian girls are taken to these countries under the guise of, being a shopkeeper or something, and they end up being forced to work as prostitutes, and then, terrible things happen to them. So Itunu was in such a position. So I decided that in addition to just sort of having my sources on the ground and doing a remote investigation and using open source intelligence, I actually wanted to visit, to be on the ground. This was in the middle of nobody. At the time, I'd fled Nigeria as well, and I wasn't sure whether using my Nigerian passport was a good idea, because shortly after leaving the country, after NSARS, I had it on good authority that my passport was placed on the no-fly list in Nigeria. So I wasn't sure whether that would apply across the ECOWAS sub-region. So, long story short, I went by road to Cote d'Ivoire. So I was in Ghana at the time. I went by road to Cote d'Ivoire. And because the border was closed, there was no way to legally cross the border. The only way to cross the border was an illegal crossing, which involved getting into a canoe.
Ooh, wow.
A tiny canoe where there's this wiry old man who is rowing, and there's only space for one person to lie down on the bottom of the canoe.
So you can dodge, right? So you can just stay away from being seen.
Yeah, because on both sides of the bank, so on the left side of the bank, there's Ghanaian military. On the right side of the bank, there's Ivorian gendarmes. They're both armed with AK-47. If they see you, they will shoot.
Jeez.
So you have to avoid detection. So if they're just seeing like an old fisherman rowing a canoe, they will ignore him. But at the bottom of the canoe, there you are with your backpack, with the laptop inside and all your devices. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so what sequence of choices and decisions did I make in my life to get me to this point? And you really question your choices a lot at that point in time, because I certainly did. So it was myself and a guide who was also Nigerian. And I actually did a story about this, which is on my platform. And if you check the story, you see a picture. Now, when we got to the other side of the bank, and we were still docking in the undergrowth, because just above us, there were Ivorian gendarmes with the AK-47. Obviously, they couldn't see us, and they were talking and laughing. They didn't really think anyone was there. And we were just there, docking low, like maybe 5 or 6 feet beneath them. And I just whipped out my phone, because I just felt like I need to document this moment, because what a crazy moment this is. I may never experience something like this again.
So the journalist in you just couldn't hold for a second to at least ensure you're safe.
I took the picture. So the picture is actually in that story. It's actually on my platform. So I think that's one of the craziest experiences I've had in terms of where it has taken me. Now, in terms of what it has denied me, well, it has denied me the opportunity to live a normal life, because regular people are able to, for example, have a fixed address, right? I haven't had a fixed address since I was 28. I turned 33 a few months ago. The kinds of relationships that other normal people, I guess, civilians are able to maintain, that's never really worked out for me, because even if you really like someone, even if the person really likes you, the kind of lifestyle you're living, just the way you have to be constantly on the go. To give you just a quick example of this, between 2021 and late last year, when I was still in a safe house, I constantly had an overnight bag packed, so that at any time, if there's an emergency and I need to evacuate, all my most important documents are in there. There's a change of clothes in there. There's some cash in there at all times. So what girl is going to want to be with someone like that?
Her life may also be at risk.
Exactly. And obviously women are looking for some sort of stability. The
woman looks out for you for security even. So, I mean, and you are the one posing the security risk here. So, it even makes it scarier.
So you are exciting to her for about 5 minutes, and then after that, you just become a pain. So that's been my experience. Oh. So yeah, I can go on and on and on, but like those are just two examples.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the fact that you did share this with us. I just thought to ask her so that a lot of people can understand what you risk to bring the stories that they hear and probably applaud you for. But moving forward, before we go straight to leadership, I mean, it's in the news this evening, so you'll be a lot of disservice if you avoid that in the news. The presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party filing an appeal to the Supreme Court. I know you have interest with, what's going on, especially with our judiciary, and as per the last election. I'd like to take your thoughts.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'm not trying to get you fined 5 million by the NBC. So I'm going to try as much as possible to be as measured as I can be. But
thank you for understanding.
I think it's fair to say that anyone who had any kind of hope in there being some sort of redemption for the Nigerian judiciary, I think that verdict just, told us what we already knew, that certain things in Nigeria are actually beyond redemption. In particular, I think the judgment, which basically, since we were little, we've always heard that ignorance is no excuse under the law. Mm-hmm. For the first time in my life, I heard a judge in a competent court of law state that ignorance is an excuse under the law. Never seen that before. That was my very first.
How did the judge say that? How exactly did the judge say that? Verbatim.
With regard to with regard to the ruling on Kasim Shettima's double nomination, the judge basically said, that's Justice Tsammani said, well, this wasn't done intentionally, so it's fine.
It's interesting when I saw that particular judgment, because remember, you'd recall that that's the same judgment that was thrown away on the grounds of local standing, no local standing, as it were, by the PDP. That was initially filed by the PDP. I don't know if you get that part of the conversation.
Yes,
So the same judgment, the court 381 said that, you know what, you don't have the jurisdiction, you don't even have the stand to come and contest if this person is valid or not, because the election has not even taken place. What are you overdoing, And then another person now waits for the election to take place, and then now goes to also say that, okay, now election has taken place, so this same person has contested. Exactly. And then you now go back and say it's pre-election. So where do we now stand?
So, I mean, there were so many examples of this. There was the judgment that said that whether or not somebody, whether somebody can be committed drug crimes or not, he wasn't the one who was penalized for it. It was his bank accounts, right? So all sorts of precedents are being laid. Right. One day, as I've said multiple times since I heard that judgment, one day someone is going to walk into a crowd of people, shoot a bunch of people dead, and walk away scot-free because it was the gun that did the shooting, not him. Because that's the precedent that is being created. If you are somehow able to divorce a bank account from the person who owns and runs it, and make a bank account a living, functioning entity on its own that can be sued and that can be given judgments for or against, and that can be guilty of stuff. Well, I mean, there are so many examples of just unbelievable things. There was one of the more irritating ones for me was the judgment regarding perjury, right? Which is that the person who supposedly won the election didn't declare that he has at least one other citizenship. He actually lied on his presidential declaration form, which is a clear instance of perjury. It's very clear. So clear that not even the Nigerian judge could really do anything about it. So what they said was, well, the way the evidence was submitted didn't meet so and so standards, or it wasn't in accordance with so and so process. So we're throwing it out. So it's not that he didn't commit perjury. It's not that you haven't proved it. It's that the way you submitted it, when you submitted it, you didn't cross one eye, or your shoe was facing the wrong direction. So because of that, we're throwing it. It becomes so clear that you were working back from the answer to the question, right? The umpire is wearing the shirt of one of the teams on the field. So, I respect the fact that the opposition candidates are still taking this to the Supreme Court. But personally, as I've said multiple times, I think the politicians have done their part. I think it's now time for Nigerians to do their part, whatever that means. Because I feel like, what is the point of going through this charade all over again at the Supreme Court? Because, there's a certain type of miscarriage of justice, and there's a certain regularity with which it will happen, and there's a certain shamelessness with which it will happen, that it becomes clear that the Nigerian system has no shame. So, maybe maybe there's really no point trying to work one's way through the Nigerian system. Maybe it's time to try something new. So, again, that's up to Nigerians. Right. That's not for me to say. That's not for anyone to say.
So fortunately, we're in Nigeria, and I mean, one of the things that we enjoy about democracy is the fact that it gives us that right to question those in authority and how they manage our scarce resources, right? So, how do you view the role of the media in democracy in Nigeria?
So,
it's interesting that I'm a journalist and I'm asking you this question, and I hope you do know that I want you to answer me.
Yeah. Okay. So, I guess in any democracy, the media is commonly referred to as the fourth rank of the state.
Exactly.
For obvious reasons. The reason simply being that the basic mechanics of democracy, things like accountability, people being informed, people being able to make choices based on access to information, all of this depends to a very large extent on having a relatively free and vibrant press and media ecosystem. I forget who it was that made the quote, but it's a quote I heard when I was a secondary school student, and it's never left my mind. he said something to the effect of, if I'm to have a choice between having courts only or having newspapers only to run a just society, I will choose newspapers. Right? Because that's the amount of power that the media. It's been understood right from, I think this statement was made sometime in the 17th century or the 18th century. So it's been understood right from that time that the power that sunlight has, right? Sunlight is the most powerful disinfectant. The power that of exposure that the media presents, that is one of the most potent forces in a democracy. So that's the role that the media ideally should play in Nigeria. Now, does the media in Nigeria play that role? Not really, and it's not because it doesn't want to. It's not because the talent doesn't exist. It's not even because the journalists aren't competent or they don't want to. But in my experience anyway, it's primarily because the vast majority of Nigerian media is beholden to the interests that are in and around power, be that political power, be that players in the private sector.
I would beg to differ, though. Because I would beg to differ, but it's okay. Let me let you down. Let me let you go down, straight down before I differ. Go on, please.
Well, so obviously there are loads of bad actors in the Nigerian media, to be sure. But I'm saying that even among those who know how to do the job and who don't mind doing the job, to a relatively high moral or ethical standard, there is that constant stumbling block, that constant roadblock of who is funding, who is advertising, who is behind this operation, so who allows what to fly, basically. I've seen this in person. I used to work in TV, I've worked in online, I've worked in print as well. I've seen it multiple times, and I've also worked in PR, don't forget, which is on the other side, the opposite of journalism. I've worked in PR as well, and I cannot count the number of times when the client wants to do something called damage control. There's a damaging piece of information that maybe it's about to get into the media, and the client will brief you to get ahead of it. And what they mean by getting ahead of it in Nigerian context is go and do your magic in the background and make sure this thing doesn't get into the news. Make sure it doesn't enter the papers or it doesn't get onto the airwaves. Even if it's on social media, make it disappear somehow. And 90% of the time, how to do that is with money. So that's just the reality of how media is sort of subordinated to powerful interests in Nigeria. This is something I've seen over and over and over again, which is why when I then made the decision to go into sort of full contact, no holds barred investigative journalism, I knew that the only way to really make that possible would be to own my own platform. Because once there is any possibility of someone having that sort of like financial influence or control over your platform, you don't have editorial independence. Unfortunately, that's just how it works in Nigeria. The Nigerian establishment does not see the media as an entity that should be powerful or independent. The Nigerian establishment sees the media as houseboys, and that's how it wants them to be, unfortunately.
Well, do you think that's entirely, their fault, or probably the way the laws that binds or guides the Nigerian media operates? There are laws that guides everything that you do, and you must work according to the tenets of those laws.
Yeah, it's a chicken and egg situation, because who created those laws? It's still the same people in power. So I remember in 2020 when the 6th schedule amendment of the NBC was being it wasn't passed because it's not a law, it's a code. But when it was launched, I remember I went on something of a personal crusade trying to warn about this thing. I wrote multiple articles. They were placed in Sahara Reporters, Newswire, all over the place. I did TV appearances, I did radio interviews. I kicked up a storm about this thing that if you read the provisions of this 6th schedule amendment, I think that was under the then DG, I think his name was Raymond Idachaba, the late Raymond Idachaba, that if you read the provisions of this schedule amendment, it is basically saying that journalism is no longer allowed on Nigeria's airwaves. Because when you are seeing provisions like anything that could cause embarrassment to the government is prohibited, what on earth does that mean?
Including what you as my guest may say now could also be termed as something embarrassing. Exactly.
So, essentially what that Sixth Schedule Amendment did was outlaw journalism as we know it. So, essentially, anyone who is practicing any significant form of journalism on Nigerian airwaves now, technically is already breaking some code somewhere. And at any point in time, the book can be thrown at the person at any point in time. So, how is it possible that such a legal framework exists? It's because the people in power made it that way. Because the people in power do not like to be held accountable. They don't like journalism. That's just the unfortunate reality.
Now, speaking about the people in power, what are the roles that we expect, or from your opinion, that you expect the citizens to play to ensure they seek for better leadership? It's not enough to just say, okay, I mean, you have written and you do your investigations, but do you have ways that, you'd expect the people to come together to keep seeking and asking for better leadership?
So I've said this in like 3 places now, and I'm going to say it again. But before I say it, I'm going to start with a question. Now, within the past 12 years, that's from 2011 to present, how many significant protest movements have there been in Nigeria? And when I say protest movements, I'm not talking about maybe Shiites protesting in Abuja, one tiny group of, no, I mean like something which was, even if it's not national, maybe 2 or 3 states at a time were involved. So in 12 years, how many times has that happened? It's happened twice.
We've had twice now. We've had the 2012 fuel subsidy, Occupying Nigeria, and the NSAS, basically.
And the NSAS, that's it. 2 times in 12 years. That is terrible. Because when you compare that to the political culture of, let me say, the French, every Tuesday, the French are out on the streets flipping over cars or burning something for any reason. So maybe the baguette wasn't warm today. Next thing, the Frenchman is on the streets of Paris burning a car. Now, I'm not saying that people should be on the streets burning cars, but I'm just saying, like, there are societies where they understand that being a democracy and holding leaders accountable or getting the right leadership, invariably involves having, an active citizenry and an active electorate. People who actually take their citizenship as an active duty, and they don't sort of view it as something they do once every 4 years and then talk about it on Twitter for the next 4 years. And they see it as something they do. So the Yellow Jacket movement in France, that lasted for more than 18 months.
Non-stop. That was scary.
So for 18 months, every Tuesday or every Friday for 18 months, everybody will come out with their yellow vest to protest for 18 months. I make both saying such a thing has never happened in the history of Nigeria before. So it's not just about having protest culture like the French, because I think the French are an extreme example, but it's just generally about understanding that you have rights, you have a voice, and your ability to use your voice, it's a use it or lose it arrangement. So basically, what use it or lose it.
Okay, because I'm waiting for you to land, because a lot of people are also worried. People are worried about being alive even after the protest. You saw what happened at the Lekki toll gate. You saw everything that played out. Yeah, the fact that we heard, or the authorities had said that nobody died, and then the eyewitnesses apparently witnessed differently, and then initial and then later revelations. People are worried for their lives. So do you not think that those are very valid worries? And beyond those worries, how can people look probably beyond them and then keep pushing? Because seeking for change and seeking for better leadership is something that a quest that shouldn't stop. But how do we look, beyond all of the fears and keep going forward?
So yes, those are certainly fears, right? And no one is saying that the fears are not valid, and no one is saying people should go out on the streets and throw their lives away because they're trying to be like Jean-Jacques in Paris. Nobody's saying that. What I am saying though is civil liberties are use it or lose it type of deal. This is not just in Nigeria, this is anywhere in the world. The reason why people go out and do all the things they do in Paris every Tuesday, any small thing they're protesting, and nobody's getting shot for it. A few people get arrested, they will get released. It's a normal thing. It's not that deep. The reason it's not that deep there is because over time they have done it so often that the government has gotten used to the reality that the people will do this. the people are going to do this. You can't stop them, and you shouldn't even bother trying to. You should leave them, let them burn out their energy, and they'll be fine. But when you give the government the idea that you basically have to nearly be pushed into the wall before you respond, the normal reaction to that of any government, not just the Nigerian government, is to keep pushing to see how far they can push. It's just the nature of what power does. Power takes and takes and takes and takes, and and sees how far it can go. Power is a hungry beast. So if you want to maintain your democratic freedoms, you have to flex them. You just have to do the occasional show of force. That's just how it works, right? If you are staying indoors because you are afraid to die, then the time when you are not even doing anything, you are not even protesting or something, but the state has just become so emboldened by the fact that you're always going to be indoors, they will come into that house, that indoors you are, and they will shoot you there. That's the problem. So you can't actually run away from it. And I know that sounds some kind of way coming from somebody who you would say literally ran away from it. But I guess
I was about to say that, but I thought to respect myself.
I guess that's where you hear the other part of the story and you realize that, I never actually got away from anything, because even where I am, there are very real, repercussions which one deals with on a daily basis, which are not going anywhere. But that's just the reality. If you want to be thought of as a full citizen with basic fundamental human rights and personal agency, you have to, flex it a bit. So, for example, in the course of doing my work, I get threatened all the time. Or I used to get threatened all the time. Any small thing, somebody is threatening you either with a lawsuit or with personal harm, or they will find you and they will do something to you. I lost count of the number of times I've been threatened. And what I've realized is that most people, when they are threatened the first or the second time, that's it, they withdraw. They withdraw immediately. And the person who threatened them, we never even get to find out whether that person could even make good on that threat. 9 times out of 10, that threat is noise, it's hot air, right? The so-called people in power, there are not that many of them. There are lots of people who talk like they are in power, but how many of them really are? So a very small example of this was in 2020 when I wrote a review about the so-called NCDC Act, a very critical review, which actually stopped that act from getting passed into law, because it was an act that basically was going to remove a lot of civil freedoms that we enjoy, the few civil freedoms we enjoy as Nigerians in Nigeria. And the then spokesperson for the House of Reps, I think his name was Benjamin Kalu, he went on Channels TV and he called me, names, and we had a back and forth on Twitter afterwards. And this man, with his foul mouth, and I was getting calls from people. No, don't you know he's a member of House of Reps? He will do this, he will do that. I said, my dear, what is he going to do? Let's see. And we had the back and forth. We had it out, and at the end, all he did was that he blocked me. That's it. So a lot of the time we kill ourselves with fear, right? I'm not saying people should go out and be reckless, right? I'm not saying, I'm not even saying you should take the risks that I take, but I'm just saying the few freedoms you have, if you don't flex them from time to time, you will lose them, whether it's a democracy or not. That's just how power works. Even if it's power that you elected or that claims that you elected it will always try to take your freedoms. So you have to keep on pushing back.
All right. So, what is happening in the present day Nigeria? Election has come and gone, even though it's still very much contested. But Nigerians are presently going through a lot. The economy is almost on a dive down, and things are happening. Do you think that beyond all of this, that Nigerians would find a way to still keep asking questions? Or do you rather also think that it's also in the place of some civil societies to keep educating Nigerians? Sometimes we don't even feel like we know about our rights in this country, because a police officer can, for instance, stop you to request for, your car particulars, which may not even be within his rights to seek such information. So what do you think we can do to properly inform people on the roles they can play to seek for good leadership and good governance as it is their right to do? Beyond, the job that we do as journalists, is there something else you think we need to do to keep people informed, understanding that we have largely uneducated population?
So what I tend to do with or rather how I tend to think of the platform that I've built, be that in terms of social media, be that in terms of my web platform, be that in terms of just the visibility of the name, I guess, that I've built. What I tend to think of it is something that presents an opportunity to educate the public. But since basically not everybody has the same access to information that I have, so part of my job, which I'm not getting paid for, but part of the job description, which is implied, is to share information, to make information accessible. So just as a very random example of this, my major platform, my platform where most of my investigative work goes on, West Africa Weekly, is a subscription-based platform. However, it's also freely readable to anybody. So if you buy a subscription, you're buying it because you want to support my work, but nothing is behind the paywall. So whether you can afford a subscription or not, it's free to read. It's always free to read. Because I feel like in a low information society like Nigeria, I feel like we haven't yet got to the point where we can deny people access to information based on whether they can afford to pay for it or not. Right? Most people simply can't afford to pay for it, and the information saturation in society is too low to risk having too many uninformed people because they didn't have $10. So it's free and it's open. Those who want to pay or who can afford to pay can pay. So that's one of the ways that I try to go over and beyond to make information accessible. Another way is the way in the course of normal day-to-day interactions, like on social media, for example, I have realized that whether we want to accept it or not, whether we want to agree with it or not, anytime someone says something that infers that I'm some kind of personality, I always react like, no, please don't say that, I'm just a journalist. That's what we all say. However, the truth is deep down, we all know that we wield some measure of influence, right? Our platforms are big. So even if we don't want to think of ourselves as, celebrities or whatever, because we're just journalists, however, we do have a certain voice and a certain amount of influence. So instead of pretending as if that influence doesn't exist, and my job is to be robotic in public, just publish links to my work and show zero sign of personality, refuse to engage with people. You're just a brand robot basically in public. Instead of doing that, I try as much as possible to be a three-dimensional person, to engage, right? And in the course of it, because I found that people actually learn more when they feel like they're just having a regular conversation or they're having a regular exchange, as against when they feel like they're reading something in a formal setting, like they're reading an article or something. It puts them under some sort of intellectual pressure that not many people deal with well. However, if they're just having an exchange with you on Twitter, the exact same information which is presented in the article suddenly is a lot more accessible to them. It's just a funny thing that I've noticed. So that's one funny little thing that I try to do. I try to extend that education mission, if you like, away from just my platform to even like my personal social media, personal engagements. That sort of thing.
Okay, so I was going to say that before we go to the to looking at some of your works that you have done, a few that I'm very interested in, especially the one in Akwa Ibom State that has got to do with the girl that died in Akwa Ibom State. This past election, the 2023 election, from my observation and from my many years of experience in journalism, has been about, I think, the one that has created the most awareness. Are you surprised about it, or do you not also think that, this is a step in the right direction? What can we do to ensure that we continue with that intensity of educating people and creating more and more of that kind of awareness. Because one of the things I noticed after the election and with the way, the tribunal judgment and all that went, is that a lot of people are discouraged and are saying, you know what, I don't want to be interested in election again. I don't want anything that's got to do with election. But should that even happen? What should we do to ensure that we keep driving that engagement? We keep ensuring that people continue to build that zest, as it were, to want to continue to know what is happening and to be engaged?
Well, I think to a very large extent, putting us aside, I think people themselves also need to understand that leadership is not a video game. So in a video game, you can rage quit, right? So if you're playing FIFA, you're winning until the 89th minute, and then the game is scripted. At the 89th minute, the CPU suddenly turns into Maradona, and you lose, and you can tell that it's scripted, it's fake, it's unfair. You rage quit, you throw your controller, you stop it. You can do that in a video game. You can't do that with your democracy. You can't do that in real life. No matter how scripted it is, no matter how annoyed you might be, you have to keep going because you really do that, because there's nothing else you can do. You just have to keep going. I myself am not exactly in the best of spirits, after that appeal court judgment. Certainly not. I mean, what are you going to do when you read a judgment that says that someone's bank accounts, committed money laundering and not the person himself? But be that as it may, does that then mean that I'm going to sort of fold my hands and throw my hands in the air and accept defeat? No, I won't accept defeat. I don't think anyone should. I think people need to remember, above all, that if there are many, there may be 1,000 people who are sitting on the destinies of Nigerians, so to speak. Nigeria allegedly has anything between 170 and 210 million people. I was telling someone today, the population of Lagos supposedly around 17 million. If 5% of the population of Lagos, 5%, which is about, so half of that would be, what? So that's about 4 million. That's even too many. Let's say 2.5%. That's about 2 million people. That's maybe Ikeja, right? If 2% of the population of Lagos,
should be more than that, though, but it's okay.
Yeah. If 2% of the population of Lagos should decide that they want to do something, that they are tired of the way things go, and they believe that there's a better way of doing things. Well, who's going to stop them? Because yes, people will send military, they'll send police, they'll send this, they'll send that. If you add all of them, everybody wearing a uniform in Nigeria, so Army, Navy, Air Force, reservists, the police, NSCDC, Customs, Immigration, FRSC, Amotekun, add everybody. If you're lucky, maybe 500,000 people. So, what are they going to do? If just 2% of the population of one city decides to come out and make their voices heard, who's going to stop them? So I think Nigerians need to remember that, as I said earlier, the door is never closed to a better tomorrow. Nigerians at any time can decide that the way the country isn't working for them and they want better. They can decide that at any time. The problem is that there has never been a time when Nigerians in unison have made that decision. That has always been the problem. Because every time the circumstances are ripe for that sort of mass epiphany to take place, somebody always remembers that, this person is from this place, that person is from that place, this one's turn, it's not that one's turn. And before you know it, that's what happens every single time. It even happened during NSAS, where some people now smuggled in the narrative that, this is maybe some group of people from Southeast who are trying to destroy Lagos.
But you heard that, apart from that, even the president himself then has said that these are youths that wanted him out of office. The president himself, Muhammad Buhari, said that. So,
all sorts of narratives. I remember when we went to protest in Abuja, the thugs who were sent after us were chanting Allahu Akbar because they had been told that somehow this is an anti-Islamic thing. we were protesting against police brutality, and somebody told a bunch of illiterate thugs that they're doing something to somehow, blaspheme against your religion or something. And the thugs came after us with fury, with clubs and pipes and broken bottles, all sorts of things, chanting Allahu Akbar. And people were injured, seriously so. I just about got away without. I mean, the only thing I got was like tear gas in my eye, nothing else. But other people weren't so lucky. Why? Because someone always manages to smuggle in something that cannibalizes that social movement whenever it's happening. So the day that Nigerians as a unit realize that whether this one is Igbo, this one is Yoruba, this one is Fulani, this one is Edo, you're all poor. You're all poor, your lives are all miserable, none of you has light. The day Nigerians realize that, is the day Nigeria will change. But so far, Nigerians haven't realized that. So
it's interesting. I like that line of conversation because, I mean, just this afternoon, I was talking to someone about, the duties of our government and especially our legislative arm of government. It's interesting how we even give them, we don't question, for instance, what our governors do with their security votes. We don't question what, the legislatures do with without the other function that is not the oversight function, the constituency projects. We don't get to ask questions, and these monies go around, and the monies that we don't even have. But if you begin to want to question, some people will tell you, leave it. When your brother was there, what did you do? So I like that. So moving forward, let's talk about a few works that you have done. You have made quite very hectic reveals, I'd rather say, in most of your jobs. I would like you to, if you can pinpoint a few of those for us, because this is a terrestrial medium. Not everyone who's listening to us right now probably have access to some of those your jobs and the magnitude of those reveals. And what has given you, I don't want to say the balls, but then the lever to even come up with those reports openly, even after you know them. That is not everything that someone knows that they talk about, right? But for you to know, and then you go ahead to write about it, I'd like you to take us through some of those jobs, if you can.
Okay, so I guess the jobs that stick out in my mind the most in terms of the impact, I would mention Conflicts for Jihad, the Boko Haram origin story. Why that story particularly stands out for me is, for many years, that thing called Boko Haram sponsored had been dangled like a carrot above the head of Nigerians. And one day we'll be seeing those silly headlines since 2011, FG to reveal, so and so threatens to reveal, and it's like, are we all stupid? What kind of nonsense is this? So that story was a story that's sought to name names, right? When you say they are Boko Haram, these are the sponsors. These people are not spirits from heaven. These are their names. This is where this thing came from. This is how it was. It was nurtured. This is how it was incubated. This is who was responsible for that. This is who funded it. This is where the funding came from. This is what the funding pipeline. In very granular detail. So the next time someone asks, who are those people who are sponsoring Boko Haram? There's an actual answer to that question. It's not, all that, God will expose them one day kind of thing that we used to hear a lot in the past. So I am pretty proud of that story. I would also mention there was a follow-up story, kind of. It was actually a story about fraud in the Nigerian banking sector. But in a way, it also ended up being a sort of follow-up to Conflicts for Jihad as well, because one of the 4 stories highlighted in that story was a story of this Qatari charity that was linked to terror financing around the world.
That was always sending money to Nigeria.
When it's basically a huge cache of secret data was leaked from this charity, and it basically detailed the intricate funding pipelines for terror around the world, because this is a charity that funds terror, right? Funds terror organizations. So you can clearly see how this thing is done. That you see donations, maybe $200 a pop in 600 places, and each of them have the same description: buying a milking goat of a family, including in places where they don't drink goat milk. So that I was pretty proud of that, because that
So
used
one would think that after these kind of reveals, because I mean, if it was in a very ideal society, we would have expected that further investigations would have immediately followed by the federal bureaus that are supposed to investigate, and things happen immediately. Did you feel disappointed in any way that you were rather attacked by those reveals, and then that nothing really came out of it?
So I wouldn't say nothing came out of it. I would say in about 60% of the stories that I do, nothing ends up coming out of it. But the remaining 40, that's something that comes out is always spectacular. So I guess that's where the reward is. So, but yes, it does irritate me whenever I put out a story, and then a very loud minority always tries their hardest to make the issue about me. Right, so it ends up becoming about the person who wrote the story and not the story in itself. So I've gone through all of this trouble to not just write a story, but to meticulously reference and source and show you all of the evidence, like it's in your face. I'm not telling you he said, she said, document I cited said. I'm not, what I give you is not I don't feel like give you kind of thing. You are seeing all the evidence there, and then you are still arguing. What are you arguing about? And then, even if there's nothing to argue about, then you start questioning my motives. That always irritates me, because is the story true or not? That's the issue. What is all this, ancillary conversation that must happen around whether the evening I was born, the sun was yellow? Like, who cares? So that really does irritate me. Something else that is like a pet peeve of mine is when I put out stories and obviously people retweet, people engage, but they don't read it. That's really painful, actually. So But
do you blame us? We have a very poor reading culture. So do you blame why you're not expecting that people wouldn't read?
So I know it's often said they have a poor reading culture, but hey, I was born and raised in Nigeria too. So again, how accurate is it that Nigeria in general just has a poor reading culture? I was born in Festac and I was raised in judiciary. I lived in Lagos until I was 17, right? So how is it that I have a good reading culture and others don't? I think it's a personal thing, because even within my family, it's not everyone that has a good reading culture. So people make their own decisions. If you decide that you want to be a better informed person, nobody's going to have to tell you to develop a reading culture. And a reading culture is not a difficult thing to develop. Reading is enjoyable. So I genuinely don't understand why. Sometimes it's not even about reading long form. Sometimes I'm not even expecting you to sit down and read a 6,000 word article. Sometimes I put out a thread on Twitter, and the thread has 3 tweets. So all you need to do is read 240 characters in 3 places. And even that is too much. For some people, they'll read the first one and immediately rush to comments, as if there's a race for, there's a prize for who is first to comment.
All right, so David, recently, I know that I think it was last year. I think that was last year. It should have been last year that you and somebody from the US subpoenaed the FBI to seek some information about some critical information based on the Freedom of Information Act, and the FBI gracefully had announced that starting from later this month, they'll begin to dish out those information one at a time. Again, I get back to that question. First, what gave you the mind to go as far as, seeking for those information? And secondly, now that information is going to be coming out, what are you looking at?
So I feel like many people simply don't know that certain kinds of information are available if you just know where to look and if you know what to do to get it. I think many people have the idea that the world is like Nigeria, because in Nigeria Nigeria is a very information poor society. In Nigeria, if you're trying to, as we are now, if I ask you how many people are missing in Nigeria right now, I can say with every bit of certainty that there is no database anywhere where such information is held, live in real time. Not with the police, not with the DSS, nothing. I'm very sure. Right, so I think people assume that the whole world is like Nigeria, where it's difficult to access information. Whereas Not so. In the so-called developed world, most countries have an FOIA framework.
But have we
I mean,
have we been able to access? Has Atiku Abubakar, for instance, been able to access all the information he needs from Chicago State University right now? So I mean, it may not be a case that is unique to Nigeria alone.
He is going through. He's going through this. He's going through the subpoena process, which was the same process that we went through last year.
Yes,
that's a legal process. Like, that's a court process. But an FOIA, which is what got us to where we are with the FBI, an FOIA is an administrative process within a government. It's not. You don't need a court to get to basically go through an FOIA. So, if the FOIA is denied, which is what happened to us, then you go to court, which is what happened. So we were initially knocked back. We were told that the person who we were seeking the FOIA on, who is now the president, apparently, that he was a private citizen, because at the time this was before the election.
Yes.
So after the election, when he was no longer a private citizen and it was now fair game, we sent in another FOI, and they again tried to knock us back. We went to court, because this time around you can't say it's the privacy concerns, the public official. And initially the response that we got in court said something about this dragging on to 2026, and they didn't really expect much to come of it. I was the one spending my money to pay for this filing and that filing. Fortunately, we got a lawyer who was working pro bono. Fortunately, otherwise I really don't know how I would have been able to handle that kind of expense. That would be like $20,000 out of my pocket, which is money I don't really have to spare. But thankfully, we got a lawyer pro bono. And just when it looked as if, okay, we're strapped into 2026, nothing's going to happen, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, all 6 agencies that we sued, that's the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, the Executive Office of the U.S. Attorneys, EOUSA, the Department of State, and the Internal Revenue Service, IRS. All 6 of them responded saying, we are going to give you all the information you asked for. And the FBI even went a step further and said, we have identified 2,500 pages of relevant material, and we're going to give you 500 pages every month, starting from October. So, I mean, that was like utopia. From a legal point of view, like, yay, our lawsuits,
So David, I just quickly like to let you know that this meeting will end in the next 1 minute, if possible, or you can rejoin with the next link as soon as it cuts. I'd also like to open phone lines for Nigerians to chime in, because my phone lines have been buzzing while you're here. So go ahead.
All right. So I guess I was kind of elated at first, because I feel like, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I should be the first Nigerian journalist to ever successfully sue the US government for information, much less this many government agencies at this time, and succeed in getting this information. Now, but having said that, we don't know to what extent this information is going to be redacted, because America is America. It's a very unpredictable.
I was going to go to that direction, because I was going to ask that, are you looking forward to getting the kind of, I don't know, fairness, really? That's what I wanted to ask. Do you think you get fair information from the end of this month, when those documents begin to come up?
I honestly have no way of knowing. I certainly hope so, but if that's not the case, well, we just have to wait and see. It's one of those deals where you can't look a gift horse in the mouth. So, you just have to see what comes. So we're waiting to see, literally.
All right, Lagos, let me let you know that you can jump in on this conversation. David, you can help join us on the other Zoom meeting very quickly. Lagos phone lines are open. Let's get to know your thoughts and reactions. Do you have questions for David? 0700 903 903 903 is the number to call. Unfortunately, we may not be able to take your conversations, or your reaction rather, on the official WhatsApp line. So you can rather call the WhatsApp number 0816 442 5875. That is 0816 442-5875. If you call us on that WhatsApp, we should be able to take your calls. 0816-442-5875. That is the WhatsApp number to call. But the phone lines to call directly is 0700 903 903 903. Well, we've been speaking with David Hundeyin. We've been taking his thoughts and reactions, some of his works, and what things that he had to go through to ensure that he brings his works to limelight. Hello, good evening to you. Hello, good evening.
Hello?
Yes, good evening. Welcome. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, my name is Adewale. I'm calling from Yaba.
Adiwali, you're welcome. Go ahead. Let's hear you. All right, apologies, I lost you there. Okay, so let me go to YouTube. I have quite a lot of reactions on YouTube. All right, Tony Chikudi says, all right, I appreciate you, Tony Chikudi. More wisdom to you, David. That's what Precious Nadi said. And Chikudi says, Mister, you have hit the hammer on the nail. And Ngozi Onwude says, I'm praying for you, for God to protect you. And Interagency says, a solid man, fearless leader, we salute you. Justin says, Jonah says, thank you. And then Davey Venture says, you are doing well, Mr. David Hundeyin. We are proud of you. And then Rockshine says, please tag the new WhatsApp phone number here. All right, I'm sure the team of IT will do that. So again, should you not have that new WhatsApp number, 0816 442 5875. 0816, I beg your pardon, 0816 442 5875. So, David, before that meeting went off, you were talking to us about the subpoenaed documents that are going to be released. Apart from the 2,500, you had mentioned that 5 other agencies responded to you affirmatively. Are you expecting a separate document from those agencies, or they'll all build up into the 2,500 documents that you're expecting from the FBI?
So I think the State Department also said they didn't say how many they had identified, but I think they're going to be releasing at the rate of 300 pages a month. So, I mean, normal people don't have a single file on them that is 50 pages long. So if someone has a file on them that is so long that someone is able to release 300 pages of it on a monthly basis, I think that already tells the story. So I think there were the State Department and the State Department and the IRS, I believe, both said something to that effect, in addition to the FBI. So there is a lot of information which is there. However, we don't know what it is. So we pretty much have to wait and see what it is that shows up.
Okay, so like what the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar, asked for in his subpoena. He did ask for information concerning the president's educational documentations, as well as his work documentations in the Chicago State University. So are you also looking at getting, documents surrounding both work and lifestyle and, all of that, or you just have a particular focus?
But the thing is, I already did that last year. So the reason Atiku is in court again is he's looking for additional information, first of all, and then he's also looking to be the one who actually owned the process of issuing the subpoena, because that gives it more probate value in court. But in terms of the actual documents, this work was already done last year. So Barrister Mike Enahureba, in conjunction with the Chicago law firm Leahy, Eisenberg and Frankel, already did all of this work. So if you read the story that I published in November called "Has Bola Ahmed Tinubu Committed Perjury?" The evidence says yes. If you've read that story, you would have seen all of the inserts. Everything is there. So the subpoena that went out to Deloitte, because he obviously claims to have worked at Deloitte. In fact, as a few days ago, he still repeated the claim that he was recruited out of university to work at Deloitte. So we sent the subpoena to Deloitte, and Deloitte said we have no records for any such person. This guy didn't work with us, right? So, and that was just one of the many instances. So of all the controversies now surrounding the supposed university certificate at Chicago State University, all of this was covered last year. We had all this information since November. And in fact, as you may or may not recall, this matter was actually taken to court in November last year. It was taken to the Federal High Court in Abuja. And it was basically left to time out because no judge would touch it. All the judges ran away. So we brought it to court as a pre-election matter, which I think it was. I think it should be both a pre- and post-election matter under Nigerian law. But we brought it to court, and nobody went near it. Like the case was given a case file and everything, but no judge was assigned to the case.
And is that
So it's basically
justifiable? Is that justifiable that no judge will be assigned the case? Until now, no one would hear that. Is that justifiable?
Well, that obviously not, but that's what happens in Nigeria when people are determined to frustrate justice. You just hear that there's no judge that is willing to hear this case. That's it. That's just how it works. It doesn't make sense, but that's just how it is. So this person was actually able to run for office, and after running and supposedly winning the election, the same court will now tell you it's a pre-election matter, after ensuring that the matter wasn't heard in pre-election period. So that's the kind of judicial dishonesty that we're having to contend with.
All right, so let me quickly take a few messages. Mr. Prince Magic, Femi Magic Kudumi, yeah, he's always one of our stronger listeners. That said, your guest this night has spoken very well and excellently, well enlightened speech, and not blowing too long grammar. I really appreciate your guest in the studio because he made us understand what we have failed to understand as citizens. And I run through a few other messages quickly. This says, good evening, Afolabi from Yaba. I would like to ask David if he ever sees himself returning back to Nigeria, and even if he eventually returns back home, will he feel safe roaming around the streets of Lagos in particular, not the streets of Nigeria, the streets of Lagos in particular? Would you like to respond to that before I move forward?
I think it's the Nigerian government that can answer that question. I would certainly like to be able to go home at some point, but right now that's not looking like something that's going to be. That's not looking like something that's on the cards anytime soon. The Nigerian government is, the present Nigerian government is, shall we say, not very fond of me. So. I hope that it happens someday, but if it never happens, it wouldn't be the biggest surprise in the world, to be honest, because people who have done less have ended up in exile forever. I don't think there's a single journalist, certainly not in my lifetime, who has ever gone to this extent to do something that a sitting head of state might consider to be offensive to them. So. I'm not naive. I completely understand the implications of taking on such a fight. I understand how powerful the Nigerian head of state is. I'm not under any illusions whatsoever. So I want it to happen, but if it doesn't happen, it won't be the biggest surprise in the world. And I've long since made peace with the idea that I may never come home again.
All right, Nigerians, you can join us on the conversation 0700-903-903-903. I don't know how to feel about that. 0700-903-903-903. That's the number to call. But the WhatsApp line is changed. So just in case you're trying to reach us on WhatsApp and you can't get through, it is 0816-442-5875. Just for the purpose of today's conversation, you can reach us on WhatsApp on 0816-442-5875. I still have a couple of, the calls are coming in their numbers, but I'm worried about taking them because I don't want it to kind of change our line of direction of thought. Yusuf from Ijego says, please, how do you verify the authenticity of anticipated documents that you're expecting from the FBI? Good evening. That should be a straightforward question. And then Laura from Egwuatu says, Precious, you brought David Hundeyin, eh? Okay, I'm glad. Well, let me take this call so you can, score kind of hat trick there. Hello, good evening to you.
Yeah, Precious, good evening.
Good evening to you. Thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Yeah, this is Oku from Shogule.
Oku, you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, it's really interesting that you brought David. When I heard his voice, I know that he's the one talking. I follow him in his account, that is Twitter. He has been doing a very great job. In fact, his level of investigation is something to emulate. So, David, good evening. I'm happy to hear from you from this platform.
Thank you.
Okay. I want to ask, these documents that FBI has promised to release, of what effect will they have in this present government? Will they have any effect as to either by through court process, sacking, retaining, or future effect on this present government? That is just my own concern.
You heard that, did you?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
I think people should sort of disabuse themselves of the notion that the Nigerian judiciary is going to do anything. I mean, there could be a signed letter from God written in celestial ink, right? And if the person giving the judgment is, a Nigerian judge, not to talk of, Kaide Ariwola, there will be a technicality. Maybe the celestial ink was the wrong color. Therefore, the letter will be thrown out. That's just the reality. So people shouldn't. The point of doing this isn't to get a result in the Supreme Court or something. That's not going to happen. The Nigerian judge is a Nigerian judge. The point of this is to establish the facts and to establish the truth, such that regardless of however he's able to use or manipulate the instruments of states to keep himself in power, that legitimacy.
That's an accusation. That's an accusation, David, on your public radio.
No, that wasn't an accusation. I'm saying regardless of if he's able to stay in power, due to a Supreme Court verdict, the legitimacy which he craves more than anything else, if these documents, tell the full story that I'm hoping that they will tell, that legitimacy will be lost, and there'll be no way to get it back. There'll be no press release. There'll be no TV appearance. There'll be no propaganda that'll be able to get it back. So that's what the point of this is. The point of this isn't to try and get the Supreme. I mean, let's be very clear about something. The case that was presented at the tribunal, I think there were like 7 or 8 major prayers that each petitioner put forward as a basis for nullifying the election or disqualifying that candidate. Each one of them was strong enough to do that. Each one, every single one. Each one. So, as I said, the justices found a way to work back from the predetermined answer back to a series of nonsensical questions. I don't see why that's going to be any different in the Supreme Court.
All right. Okay. Great. Thank you. But then, some would say that we had at least 4 frontliners or 4 front presidential candidates. Why did you choose to subpoena the US government or to want to dig information about a particular candidate and not the others, including the one you support?
Well, the answer is very simple. The answer is that because there's only one candidate that had such information that could be dug out from the US government. So I think I was asked this question, I think, on Arise TV last year. It was the same answer that I gave. It's not Atiku's fault that he wasn't involved in heroin trafficking in Chicago. It's not Peter Obi's fault that he doesn't have a heroin trafficking case from 1992 in Chicago. The only person whose fault that is Bola Tinubu himself. So saying that, you should have gone and done some digging on the other candidates, what were you hoping to find?
But there was there was an SPV case that was making the round during election. You didn't say much about it, did you?
That is, so we are comparing someone has a severe flu, right? And then we're comparing that person with someone who has stage 4 cancer. And we're saying, but
we have people moving from malaria to cancer in recent times now.
Well, but I mean, so having a case of state level corruption involving an SPV is definitely a bad thing, for sure. And in other countries, in the so-called Sena camps, that's definitely enough to get somebody barred from running for that kind of office again. But if we're comparing that with someone who has an actual drug trafficking indictment on his record, someone who's actually involved in moving heroin, that's a whole different level. So obviously the sensible thing to do would be to focus energies on the candidate that I personally consider to be the least desirable on the entire ballot.
Let's quickly run on this call. Kindly help me hold your thought there. We'll come back to that because we still have the issue that it's an account that committed a crime and not a human being. So we'll get back to that conversation. Hello, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Yes.
John Legend calling from Mushi.
John Legend, you're welcome. Go ahead, straight to the point, please.
Please, I want to ask you a question. Just a simple question. The did P2B won this election or did he fail? The way he see the election goes. It's a simple question. Allow you to answer me, please. Please. I ask a simple question, please.
All right. I didn't know that David is now INEC. All right, David, would you like to react to that?
Yeah, no, that it wouldn't be wise to answer that question, because answering that question directly is going to lead to an NBC fine. So no, I'm not answering that question.
Thank you so much for being very kind. All right, Lagos, the phone line. So if you're watching on YouTube and you're looking for the new WhatsApp line that we would use for the purpose of this conversation, it's already on the screen on your YouTube, so you can see that it's 0816 442 5875. Hello, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Thank you. Welcome. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Good evening, Mr. David. My name is Johnson. So, yeah, it grieves me. It grieves my heart. David made a statement. He said there's an allegation anyway, this and that. It grieves my heart a lot. To the marrow, where you have become a slave to the government. That if anything relating to government, you will quickly, I bet it's cut it. It grieves my heart the way you have become a slave to the government. Because of you want to protect your work, even if one makes a valid statement.
Are you referring to me now, David? I'd like to understand. Please. Oops, David, I guess that wasn't for you, it was for me. But it's okay. I can handle it. Thank you so much.
You're slave to the government? Wow, that's interesting.
I didn't see that coming. But that's one of the things I get to face on this job. And that's why I had to call another journalist to come and do the job for me, because I really can't say a lot. Lagos phone lines are still open. 0816 442 5875. So if you're trying to call the old WhatsApp line, apologies, I cannot take calls from that WhatsApp line right now. Please don't call me on that line. I'm cutting your call off so that you don't interfere with my conversation, right? So you can call the WhatsApp number 0816 442 5875. 0816 442 5875. Oh my goodness. Okay, so let me run through some WhatsApp messages. This says, ask David, has he ever been in record where United States will leave someone related? I don't understand this question. Has he ever been in record where United States will leave someone related with drug case? Oh, okay. So has he ever been in record that the United States will probably let someone who's involved in a drug case go and let the person go? If you think that that's the case with what you're pursuing, I think that's what the person wants to know.
Is that for me?
Yes, that's for you.
The answer is use Google.
They said I should ask you precisely.
Yeah, the answer is use Google.
They said I should tell you to use Google.
Because anyone I think who is over the age of 25 who has internet access shouldn't be asking me such questions. Like, I should start telling you the history of the Iran-Contra affair.
So I think the reason this person is asking, maybe perhaps because if you think that the person that the case you're pursuing is actually true, why would you think the US will let the person go? I think that's why the person is asking this question.
Yeah, so they should use Google. Like, they have the same internet access that I have. So
absolutely. Hello, good evening to you. Hello. Are you speaking to me? Good evening. All right, I lost you. All right. Hello, good evening. Okay, Lagos phone lines are still open. 0700 903 903 903. That's the number to call. 0700 903 9039. Femi Bash on YouTube says, sardines for dinner says, oh my goodness, apologies, says Africa has malaria. Oh wow. Okay, and then Femi Bash says, lots of messages I cannot read. David, I think it's better you read those messages yourself from YouTube. I'm sure you know why I cannot take some of those messages. Hello, good evening to you. Yes, I'm fine, thank you. I'm great. Good evening. Welcome.
My name is Pastor Sajid. I'm from Paraguay. I'm calling to wish David. I want to wish him well. I want to congratulate him. I want to say he should keep it up, and the Lord will be his strength. Because as a colleague, doing well, and I know it's not easy.
even you precious. Thank you, God bless you.
Much. I don't know if you heard him, but he just had a few words of encouragement for you. That you should, be good. Yes, and all of that. Okay, so you were saying something before I dropped you off that conversation, where we were looking at the things that we were expecting from the documents.
Please jog my memory.
So we were detailing on if we expected pretty much the same information from every other. Okay, no, you were actually stating the difference between what you the information that you were seeking for and what the PDP presidential candidate is also seeking for, and you didn't quite land on that thought before I cut you because I needed to take some calls.
Right. So I was saying that the work has pretty much already been done. So anyone who hasn't already read that story at this point, I'm not sure what you've been doing. You can Google has Bola Ahmed Tinubu committed perjury? The evidence says yes. That's the headline, and just read the story because all the receipts are in there. The subpoenas, the responses to the subpoenas, the forged certificates, and where the certificate, with the source of the forgery, because it wasn't enough to just establish that it was forged. We were also able to establish where the forgery originated from. That is an online forgery service called diploma-makers.com. And you can actually see the source, the source image for the forgery, and you can see that it has the same grammatical errors on it. It's the same. Someone basically bought a forgery off this spoof website on the internet and submitted that to INEC, right? And this can be proven. So again, anyone, and by the way, a few days ago when Atiku's lawyer in Chicago faced off with CSU's lawyer in the courtroom and asked the lawyer pointedly, this certificate that was submitted to INEC, did it originate from Chicago State University? And they said we cannot authenticate it.
Yes.
Which is lawyers speak, no, it's forged. So,
but then they did also state that they can say that that they can say that Bola Ahmed Tinubu attended the university. So that is to say that they're not denying the fact that the president attended the same school.
They would say that it's a lawyer it's a lawyer working for the university. Don't forget, the university did have apparently somebody named Bola A. Tinubu on its records, but according to those same records, which were obtained under subpoena, let me remind you, right? Nobody made this up. These were obtained
from the
university.
Yes, please.
Yeah, under subpoena, the person under that name, Bola A. Tinubu, was a woman.
But that same university, whilst responding to Atiku's subpoena, did state that indeed the president of Nigeria attended their school. It is a response that they gave to the courts.
Well, obviously, the university is protecting its own interest because by admitting that this person who is thought of as your alumnus and who has attained all these levels in life has become the elected president of a country or whatnot, that this person basically stole someone else's identity, possibly with your knowledge or tacit approval, they're going to get in a lot of trouble for doing that if they admit. So obviously it's not in their interest to come out and openly, hold their hands up and admit what has happened there. I should also remind you that Chicago State University, if you're not aware, is one of the lowest regarded universities in the US. And it has every kind of scandal you have ever heard of. Literally just Google the term Chicago State University and see what comes up. It's a terrible place. So all sorts of things happen there. There's anyway, let me not preempt some of the work that is coming later in the year because I have this bad habit of teasing my work when I haven't finished it yet. So let me not do that. But let's just say something else will be coming out in the not too distant future. So
okay. All right. Let me quickly jump on this call and I get back. Hello, good evening to you. Hello? Hello, good evening. Good evening.
Yeah, my name is good work you're doing.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I'd like to ask your guest maybe two questions. He spoke about exile. How did he feel when he realized that saying this on air, that it could be very, that is when he noticed in his life that this is a very risky job he's taking? What is the motivation behind his what I'm not the motivation, but what I'm trying to say is his feeling when he just dawned on him that this is risky plan. He understood the implication. The second question is with his growing up, is he somebody that fights for the oppressed? Because I'm getting the insinuation that he has this selfless services he does, and he stems from somebody that likes to fight for people, but in part of the world here we don't value such character or personality. In generation now, does it feel we need to enlighten more of our people that this is what citizenship is all about, rather than being tribesmen or idiots as humans?
If I get your question straight, your first question is how he feels about knowing that he may never get to live a normal life in his country again. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you actually did ask? Great. And then the second question you did ask, if what his growing up was like, if he's been in the character, or if he's always had the notch rather of protecting, the vulnerable, basically. Is that what you try to find out?
Yeah, and which is something most of us.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
In a developing economy.
All right, thank you. David, they want to know how you grew up, if you've always had the notch to protecting the vulnerable, if it's always been a thing for you from childhood, the reason why you're towing this part. And then secondly, how irrespective of all of this, it makes you feel that you may never get to live a normal life, except things changes, especially in your home country.
Okay, so I was definitely not the defender of the oppressed when I was growing up, mostly because there weren't really any oppressed people around me when I was growing up. I I don't come from an oppressed background at all. However, the issue was I was kind of like the family's black sheep. I've always been a black sheep. I've always been the different one. Let me just put it that way. So I came from a family where everyone else was doing something in science or the commercial field, and we're doing very well at it. So firstborn is an engineer, second is a doctor, third was a banker, and then the last born is a stockbroker. And then there's me, who decided that I wanted to be this thing called a writer or a journalist. Nobody knew what the hell that was. So there was always that issue. There was always that friction at home that, who is this guy? What is his problem? Because everyone else does physics, chemistry, biology, add math, and they get their A's and their B's. And then the teachers in school are constantly complaining about me that he's intelligent, but he's not interested. He's just not interested. And my parents refused to accept that lack of interest was because I wanted to do something else. They didn't believe that children were allowed to make their own choices, right? My parents were your stereotypical pushy African parents who believe that they always know what is best. And somehow I just had this very, very, very stubborn streak. I don't know where it came from. I have that. I've just always had that extremely stubborn streak about me. Your mic isn't muted. So I guess that's kind of like the genesis of all of this. Around when I was maybe 16.
So more like you like to dare.
Yeah, so maybe when I was like 16 or so was when I rebelled properly. My dad, I was levels, and I told my dad I wasn't going to study science at A level, and he nearly crashed the car because he was driving home. My God, he was absolutely shocked up. I was the first person in my family to do such a thing. So, and because of that, I got held back. So, funny story, I'm out of all 5 kids in my family, I'm the only one to ever attend a Nigerian university. All my siblings, as soon as they finished high school or sixth form college, they went abroad immediately. But I actually spent 1 year at Investigative University because of this issue, because my parents were like over our dead body, like that. How we spend pound sterling to send somebody to the UK to study for journalism or long budget, that was the thing. But Igbenedion didn't work out for me. I was always falling sick, and it clearly wasn't going to work. So eventually they got frustrated with me and they just kind of tossed me, okay, you want to go to UK? I'll be okay, well, let's see UK. And they just kind of got frustrated with me and tossed me there. So that was how I got my degree in creative writing and media. So I wasn't really expected to achieve much, because I think at that point they're kind of giving up on me, that this one is a problem child. Like, he never does what we want him to do. He always does what's in his own mind, and who does he think he is? Where is all of this agony coming from? So I've always had that sort of very rebellious, strongly rebellious, stubborn streak about me. So it wasn't necessarily a thing about protecting people. So it's more a thing about me wanting to do what I wanted to do. Right. So I guess when I kind of transitioned into this mind space where I decided that the society is broken and I want to do something about it, was when I watched my dad die. And yeah, it was the most avoidable death of all time.
Can you help me hold your thought briefly? I'd like to hear every bit of that conversation, but we'll have someone on the line. We'll take a few calls and we'll get back to that, please. Hello, good evening to you.
Hi, good evening.
Yes, thank you. Welcome. What's your name? Where are you calling from, sir? Yes, please. Welcome.
My name is Remy. I'm calling from Warsaw in Poland.
All right, Remy from Poland. Go ahead.
David, thank you very much for the excellent work you're doing. Courageous work. Because each time I read about you or listen to you, I just feel frightened, because you are facing people, tough people. So I just hope you're looking after yourself. Now, first of all, Precious, when we talk about university, American universities, we have seen American universities caught in fraudulent acts. An example of this would be from University. I don't know if you heard about the story. They were engaging in all sorts of fraudulent acts, and on several occasions, several institutions have been caught in the same line. So for people coming out to say, oh, Chicago University have said this, let's just take them like that, they better retain. Now, David, the question for you, sir, what are your thoughts on the corrupt state of our institutions? Because truth seems not to be a factor that matters to most Nigerians, especially the ethnic-driven and religious-driven people. Lastly, what are your thoughts, if you have any, on the recent intervention of Hundeyin on his ethical declaration that Obi lost that election? What are your thoughts, if you have any? Thank you.
All right, did you hear him, David?
Fight both questions, because the line was breaking.
Okay, so I'll get back to those questions. One of the questions he asked is, he did ask about what your thoughts were on Wole Soyinka's recent reveal that Peter Obi totally lost the election. And he also did ask question about your thought on the decaying institutions that we have in Nigeria. But before you answer that, I'd like you to, take us through that story you were telling us about your father's demise.
Okay, so regarding the Wole Soyinka thing, I was really hoping no one to ask this question, because I really don't want to address it. I think one of the saddest things in life is when you get older, and then the people you once looked up to, the people who were once your heroes, start showing their age, I guess. Because I guess the problem is that he's an old man. And I guess when you get to a certain age, certain things start to happen. So,
he said he had an institution that also monitored the election, and that's why he can affirm his results.
Sorry?
He said he has an institution that also monitored the election, and you heard that from what he said, and that's why he could affirm his position.
I have a bridge across the Atlantic in Makurdi to sell to you. Anybody can say anything. So, as I said, it's a shame when people you once looked up to, start acting in ways that you didn't really think that they would. But I guess it's what they say about never meeting your heroes, or the other thing they say about if you live long enough, you become the villain, I guess. So it is what it is. It's unfortunate, but even those who are close to him will tell you the same thing. He's an old man, so I try as much as possible not to not to publicly react whenever he comes out with one of these things again, because I guess his age is showing. But on to the second question about
the decaying institutions in Nigeria. Yeah.
Well, I think that assumes that there was ever a time when the institutions were not in a state of decay. As far as I'm aware, there's only ever been 1 decade, maybe less, in Nigeria's entire history when the country wasn't an entire mess, right? I think that was the 70s, 7 or 8 years during the 70s when there was an oil boom due to the Middle Eastern crisis. Apart from that, at every other point in Nigeria's history, it's either been economic chaos or war. So, at what point have Nigeria's institutions not been in decay? I mean, there's a story I can never forget, because my dad used to tell me this story. How I think this was 1976, I think, shortly after Murtala Mohammed took office. Was it 76? Sometime in the 70s, after the Murtala Mohammed coup. And in his zeal to, quote unquote, clean up the civil service, people will be driving to work, like federal civil servants will be driving to work in Ikoyi, and they'd hear their names announced on the radio that they've been fired. Just like that. And it was this really haphazard, really sort of ad hoc thing, and it actually ended up ruining the civil service. And actually the results of that sort of very ham-fisted action, we are still living in them today. And this was something that happened in the 1970s. So I don't think that there's ever actually been a time when Nigeria's institutions were not decayed. So I think rather than using terms like decay, which sort of infers that there's a glorious past somewhere which has been lost, I think we should kind of more be looking forward to how to completely reform and reimagine what we currently have, as against repair it, because there is no prior state of good repair to compare it.
All right, so David, that story you wanted to tell us about, the story you were telling us about how you grew up and how your parents eventually got accept your profession. You tell us, So there's a segment on this show we call the step down conversation, and that's away from serious things that happen in government, and that will be like in the next 15 minutes. I would have you tell us that then. But before then, phone lines have been buzzing, and I wouldn't want Nigerians to think that I'm disenfranchising them. I won't let them air their thoughts. So let me take a few of their calls and WhatsApp messages, and then I'll get back to that. Hello, good evening to you. Hello.
Yes, please. I'm calling from Atlanta.
What's your name, please?
My name is Andrew. My point is that I saw the declaration of Olusegun. That man is a living dead. Everything.
Have you say that? I hope you understand why you cannot say that on public radio. You don't say that about someone's character, please. I hope you understand, sir.
Okay.
Please.
Yes.
Do you have something else to say, please?
Yes.
All right, so go ahead.
He shouldn't come out and say what he said. So, because what he said is not true.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Well, that is true so far, according to the books that we have. And hello, good evening to you. Please turn down the volume of your radio. Thank you. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, my name is calling back from Zimbabwe. He answered the question. You said you should answer the first one, step down or step down. The second one is he's feeling towards the job he's doing, because it's like a calling. And from the way he has explained it, how does it feel that he's doing something noble, courageous, yet he's living in the country where people undermine this? How does it feel when he wakes up in the morning? Does he feel, is he fighting himself, or does he feel convinced doing this, knowing the cost?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he'll respond to this. I'm very sure he'll respond to this. But let's take a few reactions on WhatsApp messages. David, he still wants to know about your personal life and how you feel, right? So I'm sure you get to react to that later on. But I take a few more messages. So someone is worried about if you think that the FBI may play with juggle some of the information that they will be dishing out. That's what the person said. I can't read it exactly how the person said that. I hope you understand that I'm trying to cite a date. Do you have that worry that they may not be exactly what they should be, if you had an expectation anyway?
Well, I mean, the FBI is not the Nigerian police force, with all due respect to the Nigerian police force. So when they have made a court filing stating that they are going to do something, they will do it. The only thing we don't know is to what extent those files will be redacted. That's the only thing we don't know. But in terms of playing with the files, that's not how it works. So if there are no redactions, then we will get the information that is there. The only limiting factor on that is how much is redacted, if anything. That's all.
Okay, all right, then I'll take a few WhatsApp messages because I have quite a lot of it. This is coming from Tony Anili. He did say, good evening, Precious. Okay, he said he's praying for you. He said, any arrow fashioned against you shall not prosper. He said a lot. And he said, you're courageous and intelligent, because your analysis has enriched the knowledge of so many today. Please help me out with the latest disclosure of U.S. Court and Chicago State University controversy. If the school accepts that one Bola Ahmed Tinubu graduated in 1979, what about the allusion that such graduate was a female instead? Has any of the opponents any ground in law to still dig out such fact? And is it justiciable? That's what he said, to sue the U.S. government or CSU over the rigging issue. And David will not be answering this question, but David, you heard that right? But I don't think it's typically a question for you, but it's okay if you'd like to chime into it.
I mean, so first of all, when you say again, I feel as if people didn't read the story that I put out in November, because the work has already been done.
Okay.
So it's not a case of will so and so be allowed to sue so and so. The suing has already been done in the past. The only reason Atiku is in court presently is to get extra probate value for the same document which he's going to get, which we already got.
Okay.
Right. So back in 2022, it was Mike Enahuru Eba, it was myself, it was Lee Eisenberg and Franco, the Chicago law firm, and a private investigator called Robert Hanrahan, also in Chicago. Those are the four entities involved in bringing all of this to light. This work was done last year. So Atiku already has these documents, but he's for the purpose of his legal challenge, he wants to be the one who obtained them, which is why he's basically repeating the process again. The exact thing we did last year is doing it again, so that it can be on record that he obtained so and so documents under subpoena. Because if he doesn't do that, there's a possibility that he will take it to court in Nigeria and they will disqualify it on a technicality. They will say, you are not the one who the subpoena was not to you, blah 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 blah. You know how Nigerian courts are. So that's what this is about.
Okay, all right. So someone wants to know. This is speaking about Africa generally. That why do you think African leadership in such a position where it looks like the worst of them gets to rule the best of them?
Because Africans leave it that way, I guess. That lack of that thing which I referenced as lack of protest culture, but which is also generally just a lack of active participation in citizenship. That's what it leads to. So, for example, in a country with allegedly 200 million people, there should be ideally maybe 15 or 20 crazy people like myself who aren't afraid to pull the government's pants down, right? It shouldn't be one or two people or three people like it is currently, right, out of 200 million. But there's a certain brand of docility that I find across the African continent, because this is not just a Nigerian issue, it's an African issue.
I wanted to say that there are other countries that are even going through worse. Or worse. Yeah,
it's a sub-Saharan African issue, right? Because in North Africa, they don't have this problem. In North Africa, they have famously well-developed protest culture. But anywhere south of the Sahara, it's the same issue. We find ways to be very comfortable with things we have no business being comfortable with. And those of us who insist on not being comfortable and on fighting, to change things that we find unacceptable, we are then thought of as the crazy ones. We are then typecasted as the ones who don't like peace. We are the rabble rousers, the troublemakers. So that's the issue. So until most Africans learn how to make peace with being troublemakers and learn to be rabble rousers in their own rights, instead of looking at people who adjust to everything as though that is the standard, then we'll continue having this conversation. So ultimately, Africans themselves need to learn how to develop a bit of strong head. Let me just put it that way.
Oh, have a bit of coconut head, more like, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I read through some messages quickly. Andrew from Majestic says, should David keep his good? Okay, David should keep up his good work going on investigating journalism, but he shouldn't limit his search light on one person alone. Kudos. Meaning that you see that's exactly why I asked that question about you also beaming your searchlight on other candidates, because this person probably is of the notion that you did not do enough research, and throw more light on other people apart from just one direction. Moving forward, do you have works that may, kind of go around and spread around?
So
I know that the newborn work is different. The case about the young lady who eventually died in Benin Republic is also different. But you know how it just keeps looking like it's somehow anti-government, because it's in our head that anybody who's doing such things probably is anti-government.
Well, first of all, I should specify I'm not the only journalist in Nigeria. So if people feel that there's too much focus on one entity or whatever, I'm sure there are other journalists who can fill in the gaps. So everywhere in the world, there is such a thing as balance, right? There are people who, so in the US, you have your NBC, CNN, and then on the other side of the spectrum, you have your Fox News and your News One and your Newsmax, right? In the UK, you have your ITN, BBC, whatever, and on the other hand, you have your GB News. It's how it is.
But David, you know that you and I went through the NBC code issue just before we, got into your personal conversations, and the exact restraints or constraints that Nigerian journalists may be facing. So.
No, so basically what I'm saying is that it should never be up to one journalist or one entity to do the work of an entire journalism ecosystem, right? So, and if there's one entity that tells you that it's doing the work of the entire journalism ecosystem, it's perfectly balanced, it has no bias or whatever, that person is lying to you.
True, there must be some bias. Yeah,
that's just the reality. Like anybody who tells you that they are fully objective, that person is a liar. There's nothing that is fully objective, which is why there must always be both sides. There must be yin and yang. So if David Hundeyin is choosing to focus his energies on holding the people in power to account, then the people who feel as if the people who are not in power are the ones that need to be held to account for reasons best known to them, those people should also feel free to do that too.
So you supported the presidential candidate, the Labour Party presidential candidate. Were he in power, would you also work so hard to hold him accountable?
Well,
considering that you were already biased about him from the beginning.
Yeah, but that's the reason for the bias isn't because he's my father. It's not because I've ever met him. It's not because I like him as a person. It's simply because of the available candidates. I thought that this was the best available of the available candidates. It's as simple as that. So it's like a business transaction. It's not there are no feelings involved here, right? I'm not a fan. It's not football, right? This is real life. So it's a case of you are going to be useful to the agenda of the country, I think, for a progressive agenda. So you get in there, and then when you get in there, it then becomes my job to make sure that everything you promised on the way there, you deliver it. So that's how it works elsewhere. So it's not as if you get in there and then my job is to become your personal Ajuri Ngelale. That's not. It's only in Africa that we do that. In Africa, we have this very infuriating idea that the purpose of critical journalism is to use it as a lever to enter government. so that you can become one of them. You know, first of all, maybe this is the arrogance in me speaking, but that's not how I was raised, right? I was raised to be self-sufficient. I wasn't raised to see government as a goal or as a target, right? I don't even see myself working in government. I remember when I was doing my A levels, I did my A-level internship at Lagos State Civil Service, and it was the worst 2 weeks of my life. I absolutely hated it. I cannot work in a civil service setting. So, and I always tell people this thing, that it's not everybody's destiny to be in government. Not everybody's. So this idea that the journalist is doing this so that he's going to become a special assistant on social media or something. So that's.
All right, so let me run through some messages quickly. This says, good evening, David. The Lord be your strength. And then this says, great, nice conversation. I just tuned in and I started hearing some voices. Could that be the voice of the great David Hundeyin? This is coming from Comrade Godfrey from Surulere. And then this says, please, can somebody ask Chicago University if they do issue different types of certificates? I mean, whether Chicago University is issuing certificates with different logos and different people signing in the certificate. That means that American government should look into the Chicago State University and what they're doing. Said a lot. Chinemeriam sent in that message. And IKAZOB says, I am very happy that David is on the program this night. David, thank you so much for the good work that you're doing. You have done a lot upon the eyes of the people, or to open the eyes of the people in Nigeria and how the system should be. I know the current operators of the I cannot read that. Benefiting from this. Okay. All right. Thank you. This is essentially a prayer to you. And then Magic then says, I was aware many years around 2022 that the issue of drug trafficking etc. with President Bola Ahmed Tinubu should be true, and that he forfeited some thousands of dollars as an agreement between him and the U.S. court. But Tinubu was never convicted in the US for any criminal offense in the US. Therefore, that has nothing to do with him contesting as governor, or had nothing then to do with him contesting as governor and then now president. And he further says, it is true that the President Tinubu had drug trafficking in the 90s, or have a drug trafficking case. You didn't put case, but I'm helping you cite edit your message. And then he says, I was aware of it when late Ganifa Oyemi-san alleged him on the same case and the Chicago State University. Conclusively, President Tinubu cannot be disqualified because the Constitution says to be disqualified from contesting an election, you must have been convicted, but Tinubu was never convicted. So he can contest for president and he can win and he can be the president of Nigeria. David, you heard that, right?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, all right then. Before I take a reaction to that, because I really would love your reaction.
There's no reaction. Since he's a lawyer, you should go to court.
Okay. And then he says, our special guest, David, and a lot of prayers. Let's continue saying the truth. Hence, it's the only thing that's capable to save Nigeria. I say, Wike, your ex-governor. You had to call Wike my ex-governor. Like, you have to remind me every day. Okay. He's the only man in the world that left malaria for cancer. Oh, yeah. More truthfully, Nigerians rejected and voted. I'm looking for where I can really pin this your message so that I won't be going again, so that I shouldn't go. You said, okay, all right, okay. This is the undisputed truth. Well, you talked about Nigerians not voting South, right? And then he says, good evening. Your guest is just wasting his time pursuing the wins he cannot catch. This case of drug trafficking and certificate by Tinubu has been existing when he was contesting
to rule Nigeria.
I caught you up before, and you're here again to now say things like this now. Why are you doing this now? You don't want us to just have a good conversation. That's not a fair thing to say. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate your thoughts. All right. So, David, moving forward, you were telling us the story of how your stubbornness led you to insisting on studying journalism. Would you take us through that once more?
It never really occurred to me that it was possible for someone in his position to not be insulated or not be protected from the country around him. The idea that I was raised with was that just like the way judiciary is like a little enclave in the middle of, an area that is significantly grimier than judiciary, to say the least. As long as you worked hard, as long as you achieved your goals, you did what you were supposed to do, you kept your head down, you'll be fine, right? And he was fine for pretty much certainly all his life that I knew him. Apart from one or two health scares, he was perfectly fine. He had a great life. And then he just randomly died one day, and it was the stupidest thing ever. There was no reason why he should have died. He had a stroke, all right, but it was a survivable stroke. People have strokes all the time, right? And all he needed was just an ambulance to get to the hospital. That's it, nothing more.
Tell me about it. Are you serious? You could not access one?
Yeah, the ambulance just didn't. Bear in mind, this is over the GRA, right? This is like 10 minutes from Bagana General Hospital. It's centrally located.
Yes.
Excellent links. So it was a Saturday, so there wasn't traffic. There was just no reason. And it just didn't show up. It showed up like after like 2 hours and 10 minutes had gone by.
The ambulance.
In front of us. Yeah, the ambulance eventually showed up after he died in front of us. They examined the body, took me aside and told me he's dead, he's gone. And then I saw them packing up and leaving with the body still on the floor, and I was like,
leaving?
Where are you going? And they're like, oh yeah, we don't carry dead bodies. And up until that point, Nigeria had never really happened to me. Not really. But I think that was the first day I was in Nigeria happened to me, because like I had never experienced that kind of thing in my life before. So, and they actually left. So then I had to start browsing, checking on Google for private ambulance operators in Lagos who willing to carry a dead body. I found one. We haggled on the phone. They said it's 50K. I said fine.
David, apologies. This conversation may go off any moment, but I have a third link you may want to join immediately after this. Please, I would love Nigerians to hear this, the conclusion of this conversation. Right. Thank you. Go ahead. I think we lost him already. Apologies. Okay, so let me make out some time to take a few of your thought, because I know that a lot of you have been trying to reach us to take part in the conversation. All right, 90.3 Voice of the People FM, still where you are. It's been a huge conversation this evening with David, as he's been making, he's been putting us through his life's journey and, what it takes him to, what it has taken him to do some of the jobs that he's been doing. And we've talked about quite a lot of things. We did look at leadership in Nigeria and the role that the media can play. We also did look at the role that the citizens can play, for those of you who may just be joining us. And we did talk a lot extensively in that direction. And we did look at the risk involved in the jobs that he's done so far and what is denied him. And yes, we did look at all that. It's been quite an interesting conversation so far this evening. I have a couple of messages that I may probably run through very quickly. This says, is this not the same David Hundeyin booted from Oxford University over fraud and sexism? This is all over the internet. Can David clear himself of this allegation all over respectable media organization? Tinubu. He said Tunde from Ijego. Okay, so Tunde, you joined us. You were telling us a story about your father. I'll let you land whilst in that conversation. And then just before we sign off, I would really love you to respond to that accusation. Right. So let's go ahead. Can you hear me?
First of all, let me mention in advance, I'm not responding to any allegation. So anybody who calls in to think that they're putting me on trial, they should find something better to do with their lives, because clearly they're unemployed. That's not why I'm here. So anyway, as I was saying, after the ambulance left,
yes,
I had to search for like a private ambulance operator. They said the one I found said there was 50,000, and I said fine. It took them just about roughly another 2 hours to show up. By the time they showed up, the body had already started having a slight smell. So
that's like he's been dead for about 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah. So
oh my God.
They wrapped it up in a body bag. We went to Bagada General Hospital to the morgue, and then because of the morgue, and then there was another round of drama there. They said they're not going to accept the body. There's no death certificate. And I'm thinking, okay, so what do you want me to do? I should drive around Lagos looking for a way to get someone to issue me a death certificate. And it turned out all they wanted was just a bribe. And it wasn't even a lot, it was 11,000 naira. So basically, we're at the morgue at Gaga General Hospital. My dad's body was at my feet inside the body bag. And I was counting out 11,000 naira above his corpse to give to them. So they wrote out what they said was a death certificate. So my dad's death certificate, it says cause of death is psoriasis. Psoriasis is a skin condition. You cannot die of it. But because he had psoriasis, that's what they wrote on his death certificate to avoid having to do an autopsy. Because if they did a proper autopsy, then everything would have been unraveled because obviously the death certificate was fake and all of that. So to avoid all that while they just wrote something random and said he died of psoriasis.
And you accepted it because you didn't have a choice.
I had no choice whatsoever. It was the first time. I'd never gone to a morgue before.
Tell me about it. I experienced that this year. I also lost my father, and interestingly, in a very similar situation too. So I totally can relate because he also had a cardiac arrest, and fell, and there was no source of transportation or ambulance to pick him up. On autistic spectrum. Yeah.
So one day it was around 10. It was around 11 p.m. Yeah, we had actually put off the generator because it was that late. We were trying to go to bed. Next thing I heard someone pounding at my door. It was a metal security door. I was like, who is it? What's the problem? And it was a neighbor from upstairs. He said, from downstairs, sorry. He said, Korede is not breathing, that they need to rush him to the hospital. That can I please use my car to rush Korede to the hospital? Because I was the only one there with a car. So I said, sure. So we rushed Korede to the hospital, and the kid was pronounced dead.
Oh my.
Right. Now, they couldn't even afford to put him in the morgue. So it was this hospital in Baga that you might know. It's called Joland. That's where they rushed him to. That's where we rushed him to.
Yes.
Yeah. They obviously couldn't afford to put him in the morgue or anything. So we literally, with his mother wailing in the back seat, with 4 or 5 of us in the car, we literally went back home with a dead child on the back seat of my car. Right now, apparently his family, they were Muslims, so apparently the plan was to bury him immediately. Right. So the next morning, because I at the time I was working at Channels TV, so my work schedule was Wednesday to Sunday. So I had Monday and Tuesday off. So this was a Tuesday morning. So I had the day off. So I didn't get up till 9. So when I got up, I thought, okay, let me go pay a condolence visit to them, because I could hear the mom, crying downstairs and whatnot. So I went down to greet them. I met the kids, I met the mom, I saw some of the neighbors. I was asking after the man, that's the father. And the answer completely blew my mind. I asked, where is Mr. XYZ? They said he has gone to work. I couldn't believe it. And for the first time, it hit me that,
life goes on.
Nigeria is so awful that when a guy loses his last born child, he has to go to work the next morning. Because, he says he's an electrician who has unsteady gig work. So wherever there's work to do, he has to do it, because otherwise the rest of his family is going to starve. And it was that sort of come to Jesus moment that, oh my goodness, this is a terrible place. And I don't think I can handle this. So these were the things that sort of radicalized me. I had another bad experience when my then wife's dad, he also died under very, very silly circumstances. And, I witnessed it again. There was a 12-month period where I was just witnessing people dying. It really did something to me.
And these were people that you had personal relationships with one way or the other.
Exactly. So when it got to the point when I was resigning from Channels TV, when I was going independent, at this time, even though I was doing, relatively well financially speaking, I was writing for foreign platforms. It wasn't hard journalism, but I was doing well. I just had it at the back of my mind that if I have the opportunity to do something in Nigeria, I want to do it, right? So in addition to appearing on like Yahoo Finance and foreign platforms like that, if it's possible to develop a voice within the Nigerian media space, to try and change a few things here, like to just basically shake up people here, I would like to do it. So the opportunity presented itself in early 2019, which was just a little under a year after I left Channels TV. So I started doing some work with a platform called The Scoop. It's defunct now, but you might remember it.
Yes, I do.
The Scoop engine. So after The Scoop, then it was Business Day. I started doing work with them. Then from Business Day to like Newswire, then the Africa Report, CNN Africa. And so the opportunity to start doing like, hard journalism sort of, presented itself. And from that moment, so the very first opportunity I had to do an investigative story, it was a story about Badagry General Hospital, which had any kind of medical horror story you can imagine was happening there. I mean, doctors are carrying out operations using their phone flashlights.
Oh no, don't worry. Some of us have experienced that personally, so it's not a surprise at all. And this happens a lot in Nigerian teaching hospitals or general hospitals.
Yeah, exactly. So it's in 2019, I had the opportunity to do some undercover filming there and to write a story there, which I did. It didn't. You might not have heard about that story. It didn't make that much of a sensation. However, it had an impact because the Lagos State Health Service Commission started doing unplanned inspections in that hospital, and as a result of those unplanned inspections, some people got fired, things got shaken up, and the death rates for women who went in to do C-section went from 4 in 10 to 2 in 10, which is still way too many. It should be 0 in 10, but just for the fact that something I had done on my laptop actually saved someone's life, that was like, oh my goodness, okay, so this is what I want to do. This is that.
So that fueled you.
That difference, that difference that I thought I wanted to make. This is it. I can't bring my dad back, but at least I hopefully can stop other people from facing a similar fate. So from that moment on, the very next month, there was a lady called Mercy Abang. You probably do know. There's no way you don't know Mercy. If you're a female journalist in Nigeria, you definitely know Mercy. So Mercy is probably the reason why I have a career today, because she owns Newswire, and she was the one who basically she reached out to me first, and she said, I like the way you write, I like the way you present information, and I want you to work with Newswire. The money wasn't, it wasn't a fantastic sum of money at all.
No, but it's always never a very fantastic offer at that time.
But for me, it was about the opportunity to put my work on a big platform without too much in the way of like editorial. She had assured me that I was going to have editorial
license and freedom. So at least you don't have some of your stuff cut off and edited off and all that.
Exactly. That was September 2019. So from that point, I never looked back. So that was when I did if you read my book, The Jungle, the very first chapter in my book, the story in that chapter, that was actually the very first story I did with Newswire.
Thank you.
About the Abuja raids.
Thank you, David. David, we don't have time anymore. I appreciate you, telling us a bit of your story and, exactly how you, got fueled into the investigative journalism aspect of the profession. I appreciate that. And Lord, there are a few questions that most people are asking. I don't even know if I can take to those questions very quickly. Someone wants to know if FBI releases those information, considering that are coming from you. Is there a way you can give it to any of the contending parties to use it at the Supreme Court? Is it possible? Would you oblige them those information, since you're the one who may deserve right to some of the original documents? Would you do that?
So when the FBI is not sending documents to my email, they are releasing those documents.
Publishing it publicly, exactly. So that means the other parties can also have access to them. And this person is insisting about that story on Oxford University. And I do know that I've seen you react or respond to that story so many times. Can you just give him a word? I know, but would you give him a word so he doesn't think that you're cowing off? Because he responded to it before. I have read it. I've read it several times.
The reason he brought it up is precisely because he wants to do a gotcha. I got David Hundeyin because apparently that makes him feel important. So I'm not doing it.
Okay. All right. So Tunde, I have been told by David to tell you to go and check out all the responses he's giving concerning that story, because I have read quite a number of responses from that story myself. So just in case you're still curious, Tunde, go dig out that story and his response. Thank you so much, David. I'll be running now because time is no longer on our side. I appreciate you obliging me this interview, and I do hope that we can talk a few more times moving forward, especially when those documents begin to come up. You promise?
All right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you so much. To stay safe and enjoy the rest of your evening.
You too.
Thank you. Bye. All right, Lagos, that's the size of our conversation this evening. This has been Evening Rush with your girl, Precious. And hey, that's our only hot topic for the day. Follow the station on all her social media handle at VOP905, right? On Instagram, I'm at Precious Enyi Official, Twitter, Precious_Enyi, and Facebook, Precious. Oh, YouTube, Precious Enyi TV. I'm not such a social media person, but I'll do my best. Ensure that you stay safe no matter what you do. And hey, lend your voice. Your voice will work. At least you did hear that today. Have yourself an amazing evening. Good night.